a friend, a mentor, somebody that Ollie and I both look up to.
Don't be a pioneer. Being a pioneer is the slow boat. Google was the 23rd search engine launched. They followed people with arrows in their back. We sold $48 million of that in 18 months, and all through affiliates. People tend to way overbuild. You build something and then you scale the go-to-market and you're spending all your time firefighting. That's a way a lot of businesses die. You want to be impossible to ignore.
All right, we are back again. Another episode of Understory Unfiltered. Very special guest, a friend, a mentor, somebody that Ollie and I both look up to, somebody who's had a lot of success in their career and is still going on business number 5. Is that right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Let's not count the ones that haven't worked out. Okay?
Yeah. We'll only count the successes. But yeah, Jesse Stein, founder and CEO of Hermetic.ai, multiple other businesses in the past. Jesse, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So Jesse, I would love if you could give a quick intro on your background, who you are besides Hermetic, what you've done in the past. Give us the 60-second, 90-second rundown.
So, born in San Francisco, parents hardcore hippies, pregnant with me 1969 with a peace sign on the wedding cake, literally. And it was the summer of love, 1969, so you can imagine just the wedding videos were billowing smoke. You can only assume tobacco smoke.
Yeah, that's what we'll go with.
Long hair and the freedom dance. So I was born there, and then my parents got a divorce when I was 2. I'm an only child, and my mom found work in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that's where I grew up, and I spent every summer in California with my father. And then I went to undergrad in Southern California, and I, after graduation, spent 6 years in Tokyo, Japan. I actually did a year abroad there, and then spent 5 years working and living there. And then went back to the US, went to business school in Philadelphia, graduated and lived in New York City for most of my 30s, and now in beautiful Miami, actually a place called Key Biscayne for the last 20 years. I'm a father of 3 incredible boys, 2 of whom are in college, and the very, very lucky husband for 26 years of my wonderful wife.
Beautiful. I love that. You said a couple things there that I'm gonna dig into. But one, Key Biscayne, beautiful place. You've told me personally that your favorite vehicle is your golf cart. So if it gives you the kind of indication of the type of life Jesse is living these days, you know, mellow in a beautiful place, South Florida, it's as good as it gets. And the other thing I want to dig into is your first stint out of college. So you did 6 years in Tokyo. And what's really interesting about this is you were doing door-to-door sales, and it wasn't in Japanese. I mean, it wasn't in English, right? It was in Japanese.
It was in Japanese, yeah.
So talk to us about that. A guy from California and New Mexico doing door-to-door sales in Tokyo in Japanese. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, I had to make a living. So it sounds very difficult, and it was very humbling, actually. But I was knocking on doors and selling human resources services, so to very small companies, sole proprietors and 10 employees or less. And I had the worst sales territories, and every morning at 8:05 a.m. we would shout out the company slogans, and I wore a suit with the company's logo in the lapel pin, and I lived in the company dorms, an hour subway ride standing up, and I loved every minute of it. It was very humbling, but it really taught me how to deal with rejection, because there was a lot of rejection. There was a lot of surprise, because in the early 90s, there were very few gaijin, or foreigners, in Japan. And so oftentimes I was just knocking on a door, and it would open, and the person would be like, who is this 6'2", foreigner, and he's speaking Japanese, like, what's going on? So I learned a ton about how to handle rejection, just how to be super persistent, and also realizing that I would never be great at that because I didn't speak Japanese natively. I spoke fluently because I went to Japanese college for a year before that, and I did all the intensive sales training. But yeah, I wouldn't give that experience up for anything.
Do you think that kind of challenge just taught you how to handle the things that come, the ebbs and flows of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, and I had a really tough boss too, who just was never satisfied. So there was one time where there was a typhoon, which is what they call hurricanes over there. It was more like a hardcore tropical storm. And I was still asked to go out in my sales calls. And in between sales calls, I would take the subway and wring out my completely soaked suit in the bathroom on sales calls. So I must have looked like a complete wreck. And I wasn't able to get to all my sales calls. It was literally raining torrentially sideways. And I got back to the office, and Nakajima-san, my boss, just chewed me out in front of everybody. Complete open floor plan. There were dozens of sales teams there. We were all in clusters, and she chewed me out, and it was a really tough experience. But, I learned to deal with difficult people.
And super interesting. I remember I took Japanese for a semester in college, and Yamaguchi sensei was the same way, super tough. I think it's also interesting. I mean, it teaches you how to sell to a completely different culture. You have to learn all the different quirks and aspects of what the Japanese environment is like. So just that adaptability, I think, is really interesting also.
Yeah, for
Funny
sure.
story, too, about Ali learning Japanese. So when Ali was learning Japanese, we were actually living together in college as roommates. And Ali had a big Japanese exam one morning, and we had another buddy that was in town visiting us. And we may or may not had a few alcoholic beverages, and accidentally burst into Ali's room, wrestling at 2 a.m. right before Ali's Japanese exam. And Ali might have gotten a couple licks on me at 2 a.m. shirtless, coming straight out of bed. So fun story about Ali and I in a little Japanese classes.
That's awesome. And here you guys are making gobs of money together years later. Pretty cool.
It's literally 10 years ago. It's crazy. But so how quickly did you go from Japan into your first business? And was it Dermapril? Was that the first one?
No. So I was in Japan for 6 years total. So I did the door-to-door sales job. And then I was a journalist there for almost 4 years, a financial journalist.
In Japan?
And I was researching in Japanese and reading the Japanese financial newspapers slowly, but I got through them every morning on the train, actually. And then I wrote in English. And it was a great job. I loved it. But I kind of realized over time that I'd probably never be Japanese. And I didn't want to be one of those weird gaijin, like wearing a kimono 30 years from now, just in Japan, never quite fitting in. And I love the culture, but I did not see myself there long term. And so I somehow fooled the admission committee at Wharton Business School and got into Wharton. And then I also did, to keep up my Japanese, I did a master's in international studies from Penn at the same time, which sounds like probably the uninitiated, like, oh wow, he's so smart, he's so amazing. It was actually way too much work. So I ended up kind of doing poorly at everything. But I knew from the beginning that I wasn't suited to be an investment banker or a consultant. In fact, the first couple of months I went and met with the academic advisor at Wharton, and she said, so do you want to be an investment banker or a consultant? Remember, this is in 1996. This is before entrepreneurship was really in favor. And I said, I don't think I'm smart enough to be either. And so I'm going to declare a custom major, which is tech entrepreneurship. And she just fell completely silent. And back in the day, there were those manual course catalogs. And she looked down and she started thumbing through the course catalog. And then she looked up and she said, I don't think we have much for you. And I said, well, you're stuck with me, And then she said, and then another silence. And then she said, so why didn't you go to Kellogg? or Stanford. They're great at entrepreneurship. And I was like, oh my God. I said, well, you're stuck with me. So, so that was the Wharton story. And then I graduated there, got really lucky that the late 90s was just the beginning of the commercial internet, and moved to New York City. And right around that time met my wife to be, and we moved into a little apartment in the Village in New York. And my wife's nightstand for the first 3 years of our marriage was one of those old school big computers. We had 7 or 8 huge computers in our little bedroom because I had them connected to wireless modems, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night and submit my websites to all the different search engines to get them ranked to drive traffic. So the first real business, which was the original question, was affiliate marketing. And so I would take offers from advertisers on a CPA. So like Ancestry.com would pay me $40, right, for a conversion. And then I would go out and buy media on, a CPC or a cost per view, and then I would arbitrage the difference. And then that became actually a really interesting business, scaled that to $28 million in revenue, and we became one of the biggest affiliates to a bunch of the dating websites at the time, Ancestry.com. Like, it did really, operating profit was incredible. And then I sold that in 2005 with my business partner, Paul, to a portfolio company of Insight Ventures. So that was 2005. And then at that time, got obsessed with domain names, specifically like 1-word or 2-word enthusiast domain names that had no synonym. So I paid a little over $1 million in 2005 and 2006 this is after selling the media arbitrage business, for hobbies.com, boating.com, yachting.com, biking.com, barbecuing.com. But the one that really took off was sportsmemorabilia.com, which paid $12,500 for. And then the common thread through all these businesses is just an incredible team and incredible people. I know it sounds very cliche, but it's so true. So, Sportsman, we ended up scaling to the biggest autograph store on the internet, and then selling it in 2013 to Michael Rubin. And
that's no small name. That is the Michael Rubin from Fanatics, multi-billionaire Michael Rubin.
Yeah,
we're talking about the same guy here.
Yep, talking about the same guy. Yeah, and then right around 2005, 2006, around the time I bought all those names and started Sportsmem, I was in a Sephora with my wife in New York City, and I was completely bored out of my mind. And she was buying a skin cream, and I saw how much it was. And then I noticed that like the whole store was the same price for all these skin creams. And so the next day I called a bunch of formulators and formulated my own skin cream, and I named it Dermapril. And that didn't sound, I took a bunch of prefixes and suffixes from well-known brands, and I just like smashed Dermapril. And then I added an SP just for fun. And we sold $48 million of that in 18 months, and all through affiliates. And so had really, at that time, like definitely a through line is acquiring traffic or, underpriced attention at scale. So diabolical shortcuts for go-to-market, basically. So in the case of the media arbitrage business, just found a lot of underpriced clicks. And in the case of Dermapril SP, knew that we could arbitrage using affiliates and then scale like crazy. And then, at this time developed an expertise in SEO as well. So Sportsmem, 80% of our traffic came from organic. And now it's 20 years, actually this year, since I bought that domain. And if you typed in any player plus autographed, signed memorabilia, I bet Sportsman is either number 1 or number 2 to this day. And all because of the SEO work we did back in the day. And that includes for AI search as well.
So in summary, what you did is you got unbelievably good at one skill that you knew you could apply to multiple different businesses. And then you took that skill and you created success across multiple different verticals doing the exact same playbook over and over and over again.
With a lot of luck and a great team and great timing.
Of
Yes.
course.
Correct.
Of course.
Correct.
That's unreal. And I think that's an unbelievable lesson also to anybody. It's like if you have that skill, just because you go into a different vertical or a different niche, if you have that skill and that skill is business, that skill is attracting eyeballs, consumers, you can really do quite a bit. You don't have to narrow yourself into this one tiny little vertical or this one tiny little niche. I mean, Hermetic, which we'll get into in a bit, is in a totally different niche now. But like you said, you've mastered go-to-market, and I think that is a massive component to success in any business today. So I love that. I also want to talk about some of the guerrilla tactics that you use, and maybe I shouldn't call them guerrilla tactics, I don't know, but to scale sports memorabilia with SEO in a time where AI and being able to write articles at scale using different LLMs wasn't a thing. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you recruited like 150 freelancers, right? And they were publishing, I don't know, 25,000 articles all over the place
Yeah.
to do this SEO back in the day?
That's right. That's right. So it was Diet Spotlight, and we just produced a bunch of content, then updated it frequently, and never sold the business, but it just became this incredible cash cow for like 13 years. And was a very simple business as well, so it had few moving parts. But yeah, a big deal here for me is figuring out how to acquire customers, whether you're B2B, B2C, B2B2C, like how do you acquire customers cheaply and at scale using a series of unconventional hacks that are very difficult to reverse engineer. That's it. Because if they're easy to reverse engineer and they leave breadcrumbs, then you're going to have competition. But if you can create enough steps that are really difficult, even using a bunch of online tools to figure out, then I think you can have a pretty wide and a pretty deep moat.
What would be an example of that related to the SEO work that you did? What's a guerrilla, like not a guerrilla tech, but what is that kind of like hard to reverse engineer aspect of it, of what you were doing at the time?
Yeah, God, there were a bunch of things there. So, for example, the way that we would interlink the website, okay, and then we would get rid, it's called page pruning. I won't get too much in the weeds here. And also SEO is a little bit of a declining, the more salient thing to talk about would be AI SEO, which is incredible, which I've been deep diving on lately, which I think your listeners would be fascinated by. But on the SEO side, we would, for example, we had somebody in South Africa, all he focused on was link disavows. So every site has a bunch of other websites that are linking to that site. And there's a bunch of spam websites. And your backlink profile and the quality and the history of your backlink profile is really important to Google. And so if you show Google that you're disavowing the spammy links every month regularly, it's a huge quality signal, and very few people know that. Even great SEOs. And we actually found someone in South Africa who all he did was link disavows, for example. Then the interior linking architecture, which I talked about, that's how your site internally links. And then every month looking in your Google Analytics, and any page that's not getting much traffic at all, you just do a 301 redirect to the category page. So if you find, for example, on Diet Spotlight, which isn't a site anymore, and it lasted and did very well for about 15 years, but you would see that like there's a product that did very well at one point and got a lot of traffic, now it's getting no traffic. That's just dead wood. And for Google, there's a certain budget. Like if you have your page rank dispersed across 10,000 pages versus only 1,000 pages, the 1,000 pages will be a distilled reduction sauce of quality, and it'll rank those much higher, all things equal. And so you want to prune, even today in 2025 or 2026, website owners want to prune those pages very regularly, and you want to make sure that they're all linking to one another. And then thematically, that your sites, that your pages are linking to one another. So if you have a section that's all, in Diet Spotlight, that's all certain types of weight loss supplements, a specific type, those should all be siloed and linked to one another. And you should be very intentional about that. And for AI SEO, by the way, the big hack, and this is worth the price of admission to your listeners right here, is for some reason, ChatGPT places a really high and irrational emphasis on having your site included in directories, any directory at all. So industry-specific directories, local directories, your local chamber of commerce, whatever it is, it's GPT in particular, which is a lot of the traffic. There's Gemini too, which all follows the Google algorithm, but GPT is obsessed with that. And because directories are structured data, they're able to crawl those very easily, and they'll rank you higher than Mayo Clinic or whatever. I mean, it reminds me of SEO in the late 90s and early 2000s, and that you could like do little hacks like this and crush it. But that would be the AI SEO hack I'd recommend to your listeners.
That is an unbelievably good insight that I had never heard until just now. That is
Yeah,
awesome.
I feel like we have to send that to our SEO team.
Yeah. I mean, we literally have an agency that we're paying a lot of money every single month to do this work for us. They've also told us that Reddit indexes very heavily.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. So it's authentic, user-generated content on Reddit, and it's also directories. Those are two hacks. It's
those are two hacks, and then you wanna type in. You want to have people type in, preferably an offshore team. There are services that do this, but they don't do it very well. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the types of prompts, which is what they call queries, obviously, in ChatGPT, for example, that one of your bullseye customers in ICP would type in, and you want to see who comes up. And then they create a spreadsheet of that plus the citations, and then you'll see the people that are coming up consistently for those types of prompts, and then the citations, and then you look at their backlinks. Who's linking to their websites, and then before you know it, you'll have a list of 50 websites you need to approach to somehow get included in those websites. And then you want to use tools, classic tools like SEMrush, which should be an arrow in any digital entrepreneur's quiver. That one, and Ahrefs you want built with. Those are like probably the three major tools that I would like drop everything you're doing and go out and buy.
That makes a ton of sense. I think it's really interesting that, look, the businesses you built up until now, they were the most random things ever, like for lack of better terms, right? Like sports memorabilia, an affiliate marketing agency, a skincare brand. Like there's almost no correlation behind any of this except for the fact that the last 10 minutes, you've been giving us a masterclass in SEO and now GEO. It just goes to show, it's like that skill alone has created so much success for you, your family, your business partners. I don't think any investors, maybe there's a silent investor that we never knew about, but mostly bootstrapped.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's just like that's the benefit of learning some super high value skills. Like today, there's GEO, there's go-to-market engineering, there's paid ads, which is two things that we do, and it's changed our lives. And it sounds like SEO and GEO are the things that have changed yours. So.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, a lot of experimentation, a lot of trial and error, a lot of rocks in the road, and hurdles and snags, and plenty of businesses that have blown up on the launch pad. I tend to cut things off early, although I definitely don't have a crystal ball, and I don't seem to get any wiser with age. So I think a lot of it is probably luck, timing, a lot of definitely persistence. So that's, as you guys know well, you guys are really successful entrepreneurs. Persistence is a big part of the game. And then just having the good fortune to attract wonderful people, and I have a number of hacks that I use for attracting great people, because that's exactly like finding underpriced attention, is knowing how to use LinkedIn to reach out to your ICP for a given role at scale, and then getting a bunch of interested people to reach out to you as a result of your outreach, and then interviewing a bunch of people for every single role, and then wherever they are, flying to meet them before you give them an offer letter, sitting down with them, having lunch with them, having dinner with them, meeting their family, making sure, if there are red flags, that just let them come up there versus in 3 months or 6 months. Such a waste of time for them as well. Like if they're not feeling it from you for whatever reason, then let it come up there. But definitely a power move that I learned is fly to the person. If you really if you've interviewed 15 people for a role and you just love this person and they think you think they're a game changer, then go fly and meet them. One of my mentors, Bob Davis, taught me this, and make an agreement with them that, listen, let's agree that if there's a deal to be had and we're going to collaborate here in this company, that let's agree that before I leave Austin, Texas, or New York City, or Chicago, or San Francisco, wherever they are, that we'll come to that agreement before I leave. And then you just fly in the morning, and it could be a one-day trip, and you spend the whole day with them. Clear your schedule, spend the whole day, whatever. See their mannerisms. See, especially if it's like a sales-related role, make sure that they're good at people skills and rapport building and everything else. But the team aspect, and I know in the kind of the post-COVID hybrid world and in AI, people are like, oh, isn't team becoming less and less important? I think it's becoming more and more important actually over time, and it's a source of massive differentiation long term if you can do it well.
I would totally agree with that. That's something Ali and I focus heavily on. We don't fly to meet all of our team all the time. Maybe that's something we should start doing. It could be fun too. But we do take a very, very, very conscious approach in the way we build the culture at the company. And because of that, we have an unbelievable retention rate. We've had 1 or 2 employees ever leave the company.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah. That's it's a huge component, I think, of our success too. It's just making sure that people are happy, everyone meshes together. It is harder to read the body language over these calls. I mean, I can only see your shoulders, your neck, and your head, so you never really know. Maybe we should all start standing all the way back here so you can see everything.
But I'm wearing my bathing suit, so yeah.
Me too. Me too. I'm wearing a camo bathing suit actually. But no, that's a great tip. I think that's a great lesson for everyone to learn. I'm going to pivot here a little bit because there's something that you said that I think is really interesting, and it's also something that absolutely matches your story. But you've said that you shouldn't be a pioneer because pioneers always end up face down, and what you should do instead is follow the pioneers and walk in their footsteps. And I think you're a walking testament of that. You haven't created some sort of new novel business. What you've done is you've taken existing businesses and you've just made them better and more efficient, and you built them quicker than other entrepreneurs. But how did you have that wisdom early on? Or did it take you some sort of lesson to learn that?
Yeah, well, I think that anyone who's an online entrepreneur realizes that success leaves clues, and there are digital breadcrumbs for almost anything. So, for example, Facebook ad library, right? You can see, just by going to Facebook ad library, all the ads that anyone has ever published on Facebook. And so if you are going into an industry, like one of the first things you want to do is follow the pioneers, right? Because how many hundreds or thousands of hours of toil and experimentation and A/B testing did it take for them to end up with the ads that they're actually currently running? And you can see over like a period of years the history of that. And you can also go to archive.org and see a history of their website too. And so success leaves clues, and Google was the 23rd search engine launched. They were not a pioneer. They followed people with arrows in their back, right? Apple did not invent the smartphone, not by a long shot. And they stood on the shoulders of giants, and then of course they took it to the next level. But yeah, if you can help it, don't be a pioneer. Being a pioneer is the slow boat, and it's trial and error. It's easy as a pioneer to run enthusiastically.
How do we get to
it in the wrong direction? I don't know what just happened. I'm seeing double.
Yeah, I'm seeing double too. We'll kick Ollie out on this other one.
No problem.
I think he'll disappear in a second.
So the one exception is my current business, our current business, Hermetic AI. We're definitely pioneering because agentic AI is so new, and there's been no one in this space, because before AI, this was kind of impossible to do. So there's definitely quite a bit of pioneering work we're doing now with Hermetic, and we're loving it and growing very, very quickly. But for the go-to-market motion, for recruiting, for success, customer success, and a bunch of other aspects of the business, we're not pioneering. We are taking tried and true growth hacks from other businesses and other people and transplanting them onto our business so we can grow much faster and get to the finish line much faster.
So let's segue into that. Let's segue into Hermetic, because I think what you're building is really cool. And you and I have talked about this individually, but I love AI and high-tech products that serve less high-tech industries. So in your case, it's hospitality. But you mentioned very clearly that you didn't start off with hospitality. You kind of adapted and realized that hospitality was a place where you could find success. So 2 questions. 1, what is Hermetic? And then 2, why hospitality, and how did you come to that realization?
Yeah. So Hermetic has developed an AI agent named Mia that engages and converts inbound private events leads for restaurants, hotels, and other hospitality venues. So somebody, about 80%, 80 to 90% of the time when someone wants to plan a private event, they'll go to the restaurant website and they'll fill out a form. First name, last name, date of event, type of event, budget. There's a box usually for anything you want to say, custom, 3 of us are vegetarian, whatever. And you submit that lead, that inquiry. The average response time before us was about 2 days, 48 hours. Even during business hours, if you submitted that at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, you're going to hear back by the afternoon on average on Thursday. And we audited about 500 different forums. And so we saw that there's a big problem there. And so Mia, our AI, engages that lead within 13 seconds of the form submission with a personalized human-like text message that gets responded to almost 100% of the time. And then Mia ingests the entire knowledge base of the restaurant or Topgolf or other venue, and can answer all manner of questions. So including food and beverage minimums, how big the venue is. She can quote availability. She can even schedule an initial walkthrough with the event coordinator, because we integrate with the CRM and we integrate with all the event coordinators' calendars. And then just when the lead is white hot, that buyer is ready, Mia will hand that off to the sales coordinator to close.
And there's a sentiment analysis in there, I would assume.
What was that?
There's some sort of sentiment analysis built in, I would assume.
Yeah. And she knows when it's it's time to hand it off. And it works phenomenally well. And there's a bunch of other things she does in there. She can get contracts signed, and she stays in touch with the lead post-event. So if you're an executive assistant with a pharma company in Boston, and your job is to plan 4 events a year for your department, and you're submitting a lead form, usually these executive assistants are venue agnostic. They're not like married to a single venue, and so they'll submit each time multiple inquiries, and 80% of the business goes to the venue that responds first and builds rapport. And so Mia is all about speed to lead, and that's part of hospitality, is getting to people quickly, like responsiveness. And then you asked why hospitality. Well, we cycled through multiple ISPs, multiple buyer personas, I should say. And we started with SaaS, and we realized that there's like just about 40,000 SaaS companies, and they all sell to one another. And it was just kind of a messy alphabet soup of vendors and stuff, and it was hard to break through to the decision maker. And so we moved to home services, and we made about 8,000 outbound calls to different like pest control and roofers and windows and doors folks. And we were definitely feeling the pain. And then we tried hospitality and could really feel the pain. And when you zoom in to the workflows of a hotel for private events, of a restaurant for private events, of a escape room franchise for private events, the workflows are really complicated. And so we realized that this is like, there's a lot of meat on the bones of the opportunity. There's 120,000 event capable venues in the United States alone. And they're all in pain. Like, we are not a vitamin, we are a painkiller. Like, immediately when they hook up Mia, there's like, wow. And the event coordinators love it, because they're like, oh my God, you're taking away so much pick and shovel work, so much manual work that I've had to do before Mia, and you're driving 2.5 times the opportunities so I can close more business, earn more income, and drive more revenue to the restaurant.
It is kind of a beautiful thing to see some of these, I don't want to call them dilapidated, but just older industries that haven't adopted as much technology as high-tech industries, which is what we're consumed by every single day if you work in B2B, right? So this look on someone's face when they play with AI for the first time, it's almost like, my dad is 70, right? So it's like a 70-year-old man going into ChatGPT and asking it a question for the first time. That's kind of the same sort of light up effect that you get from somebody who works in one of those industries when they understand what's actually possible with AI agents, something like Mia. But there's another thing that you said that I want to just emphasize a little bit. So the way you came to that conclusion, it sounds like, was a bunch of outbound efforts, right? So in your case, it was cold calls. It could be emails. It could be LinkedIn messages. It could be anything. But the benefit of outbound in particular is it's extremely cheap to try. So you don't have to have this enormous budget like you do for paid media or some other services to go and test the waters. You can send a bunch of emails. You can make a bunch of cold calls from your cell phone. You can do whatever you want, and you can test the waters, and you can find out what's actually working. You can gather all kinds of research. You can get feedback from all these different industries to determine who actually has what need, where is the pain, how bad is the pain, things like that. And even you, a seasoned entrepreneur, you still use that same tactic to figure out exactly where the ICP actually was and where you'd find the most success. So some things don't
Thank you
change.
for correcting me, by the way. I think I said ISP earlier. I meant ICP. Yeah.
It's okay. I knew what you meant. And yeah, obviously you're seeing a lot of success so far with Hermetic. It sounds like all of the clients that you've already onboarded are seeing a ton of success. I think you said double the conversions on
Yeah, it's crazy.
inbound leads.
It's incredible.
The time goes from 2 days to 13 seconds for a response, which is unreal. So there's all these massive benefits that are just so easy to give to your clients because you've built this awesome tool that they never even knew was possible. So I'm sure in those sales calls, it's actually a great experience for them. They come in and they see something like that and they're like, oh my God, it's a no-brainer. I would imagine the sales cycle isn't even that bad.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And we took a long time to get here, for sure. And to speak directly. And I think that like one experience share, like I definitely don't have any advice to give anyone, but I do have experiences, is focus. Like every time I have lost focus and tried, for example, multiple different personas and said, I'm gonna hit pest control. Like the temptation would be to take the code base for hospitality and use it for multiple other industries, and you'll be jack of all trades and master of none, right? And there's so much value in eating and sleeping and breathing one specific persona, and speaking directly to them in the demo. And so you talked about the lack of friction in the sales motion. A lot of that is the focus, and we know our swim lane, and we're not veering from it at all.
Ever.
And so this ICP is like, they feel like the solution fits like a glove just for them. And that is, a lot of entrepreneurs will nod their head, but I had made the mistake multiple times in the past of picking up shiny pennies. And the problem is, like a lot of, like you guys for sure, I won't include myself in this group, but you guys for sure and your listeners are really smart. And smart people are curious. And curious people tend to lurch toward the shiny and the new. It's just what they do. And so it's really tempting to pick up that shiny penny and say, of course it'll work for pest control. Of course it's the same thing and whatever, but little do you know that it's way more complicated. And then you're opening yourself up to competitors. You are immediately making your moat narrower and shallower. And for us, we are so obsessed with this private events hospitality workflow that it'll be impossible for a horizontal player to compete with us. So for an incumbent, like, you name it. There's a bunch of these agentic.
We don't need to name them. We don't need to name them.
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be my one experience share, is just like focus. And also, like, the narrower the boundaries, the more depth and like majesty you get. The metaphor I love is the Grand Canyon is majestic because the Colorado River is narrow. Because the Colorado River is narrow, the water has force. And so over millions of years, it's created this majestic, thing called the Grand Canyon. And I think that metaphor maps pretty neatly to businesses as well. And the deeper you go, it feels like, there's not enough ICP to like really scale this thing, but it's like there's 120,000 event-capable venues in the U.S. There's plenty of ICP to go around. For sure.
And also, I mean, you told me this at lunch a couple weeks ago. I asked you, what do you think the trick is for us to get to where we want to go for the next year? And you literally said, keep doing exactly what you're doing.
You guys are brilliant. You guys are brilliant. You have a lot more to teach me than I have to teach you, honestly. You guys are incredible.
I don't think that's true. I think you're being humble, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
Jesse, I had a question just about the team structure for Hermetic. Do you have a co-founder or anything like that, or who's handling all the technical aspects of everything? Unless you are too.
Yeah. So I have two co-founders, Bensa and Brandon. And Bensa is our technical co-founder, and he was at Morgan Stanley and BlackRock building AI applications, AI ML applications, and he has a master's in machine learning, and he's incredible. So that's Bensa, and then Brandon is our head of sales and has a whole incredible career in sales and was an entrepreneur and founded and built an $18 million sales organization, and so them, and then of course, we have our amazing chief product officer, Shushma, and a whole bunch of other people who I'm really, really blessed to work with.
That's awesome. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs starting out who are looking for a co-founder? Yeah,
so if you're non-technical, find a technical co-founder. That is like absolutely the move. And I mean, it's fine if you're complimenting one another and neither of you are technical. That's fine too, but you must find that rock star who is technical if you're doing a technology business and incentivize that person. And the litmus test is you should feel so fortunate that you brought this person on board. Like Shushma, for example, our chief product officer, she could have had her pick of any SaaS company, any AI company. And I interviewed 22 people through this hack that I do with LinkedIn. Started with 605 people, engaged with 59, interviewed 22. The top 6 I could have sold to top tech recruiters. Like, they were that good. And multiple other people interviewed them and were like, my God, they're amazing. And Shushma was a level beyond. And so very, very fortunate to work with her. And I think she feels the same way. So that's like the ultimate collaboration. And then just be generous on equity. Be generous on equity. And then I'm totally open. Like, I love when my views are challenged and ultimately proven wrong, which they often are. And so, yeah, that's, for me, the litmus test is you should feel incredibly fortunate that this person chose you.
That's awesome advice. And I think a lot of it has to do being complimentary to your co-founder as well.
I was about to do the same thing.
Yeah, if you're doing the same things and you're focused on the same things, like you're just never going to be making the progress when you're allocating the same resources at the same time to completely different projects that you're specialized in. So I totally see where you're coming from though.
Complimentary, not redundant. It's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, and also complimentary with an eye. Yeah, like Alex, that's an awesome shirt you're wearing. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. We were just talking about
complimentary. Sorry, that was a dad. That is classified as a dad joke.
Yeah. We're not there yet, so give us a few years. There's another thing I want to talk about too, and it's networking. But networking often comes with a price. So, and sometimes it's literally a price. You literally have to pay for entry on some of these membership groups.
Yeah.
Others, you have to be very impressive, and you already have to have a track record of success. You have to have done something. So in your case, you're involved, I think, in a few different organizations, but one in particular that you see a lot of value in, and you've told me I should be joining, and Ali as well, is YPO. So you're very involved in YPO. I think you were the former chapter chairman. You're a regional board member. I think you're a co-chair of the 2025 Global Marketing Summit. But you spend a lot of time with very successful people, and you've told me that Hermetic, one of the reasons you've been able to get off the ground running and be able to build a lot of these great relationships early on is because of that network. But talk about the value of that network and how important it is that once you do find the success, you start bumping shoulders with other people in those communities.
Yeah, I cannot speak more highly of YPO, and I've given hundreds, probably thousands of volunteer hours to that organization. So what you put in, you get out for sure. And you just want to make sure that you're playing tennis with people who are better than you, so to speak. That's it. If you find yourself networking with people who you're not totally inspired by, then they should bring out like the pull motivation in you. Meaning, like, push motivation is where you're doing something from just raw willpower, which in the short term works, and everyone knows in the medium and long term does not work and creates burnout. But pull motivation comes from internal motivation, something that's bigger than you, that's pulling you and guiding you. And then it can also come from the people that you hang out with. Certainly it does for me. And so in YPO, like, we also break up into these forums, for example, that are typically 8 or 9 people, and you meet every month, and in confidence, it lives and dies around confidentiality, and you talk about everything. talk about your business, your family life, what's going on. You do retreats. And I highly recommend for everybody that level of coaching and mentorship and vulnerability and openness, because otherwise it's really hard to see around corners, and it's really hard to see your blind spots, because your friends are going to yes you to death, because you're around them all the time and they're used to you and you're used to them, and it's very rare that you have anything structured where you can like present to a friend and they can give you unvarnished, honest feedback. Whereas in organizations like this, and there's like EO, I think there's like Tiger 21, there's other organizations as well in addition to YPO. And if you can network at the chapter level and go to these events and hang out with people who you're inspired by, and also be in a smaller group where you can get that, where they're not sanding off the truth and putting varnish on it, where they are, and they're telling stories and opening up about their own life. And of course, what happens when someone tells a story about some challenge they had? You go, oh, wow, I've had that challenge. Or when my kids are college age in the future, like your kids are now, I'll remember this story. And that'll help me see around corners. And so I cannot emphasize enough the power of, I wouldn't even call it networking, of associating yourself with people who just inspire you. And it creates that pull motivation that is so much more powerful and so much more sustainable. And when you have that pull motivation, you just show up in a different way to situations, because you're on fire. You'll run through walls, right, to do stuff. Whereas push motivation, where you're just like, oh, I have to do this and I gotta make a living and gotta wake up and and you're just kind of going through the motions and not truly passionate about it, and it's all head and no heart. That is, in my opinion, a recipe for disaster.
I love that. That was the best answer you could have given us. The final two questions, and these are questions that we ask every entrepreneur that comes onto our podcast. They're very important. I would argue the most important. But 10 years from now, and it doesn't have to be 10 years, let's say at the end of your life, what's one sentence that defines your legacy and the impact that you've made on this world?
Ooh. Jesse owes me money. No, I'm just kidding. It's a tough one. I didn't think about this. He lived life on his own terms, and he did his best to enrich and enlighten the lives of the people around him.
Love that. And something you said, by the way, that you haven't mentioned on this podcast, but I think is one of the coolest things I've ever heard from a dad, is that you took your kids out of school for over 300 days to travel the world.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, after I sold sportsmemorabilia.com, we pulled our kids out of school and took a year sabbatical. It was actually 385 days. And we traveled to 36 countries and 6 continents. And we dipped down to the southern hemisphere when it got cold up north, and vice versa. So it was perfect. We followed the beautiful weather around the world, and we went to a lot of really off the beaten path type places where our kids were unlikely to go after college with a backpack on. And it was just a super, super lucky experience.
I would say that is definitely enriching the lives of others around you that you love. So kudos to you on that one.
Thank you.
And the last question is, what advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur that you wish you had when you first got started?
Wow. Yes. Start with a very small group of customers, like 2 or 3 or 4 customers, and get into a deep multi-month feedback loop with those customers and handcraft your solution, whatever it is, whether you're consulting, whether you're doing a tech business, whether you're doing lawn care, whatever it is. Make sure that those first customers are a 10 out of 10. like that they are that, and they're telling you the truth, and that they are like, you are the best consultant, you are the best software solution, you are the best media buying solution, you are the best clay integrator, consultant, whatever it is. You need that, and then you need them to say, and I would recommend you, I would stand up on a mountain and blow a trumpet for you guys to any non-competitor. And to a competitor, I would never recommend you because you're a weapon. And so that's the litmus test before you build much tech. Like really, really build as little as possible. The temptation, I think, for a lot of people is, because it feels good, is to hire people to build an app, or something, and people tend to way overbuild. And then what happens is you're working, or you build something and then you scale the go-to-market. Now you have 100 customers and you're spending all your time firefighting. That's a way I've noticed, that's a way a lot of businesses die, is that they just scale too fast in the name of bringing in revenue. And so it's counterintuitive, but hold off. My experience share, again, not advice, my experience share, because I've made this mistake multiple times, is to hold off, get into that, obsess over your client. Like be completely fanatically obsessed with your client. Like fly, the way I talked about flying to meet a prospective team member, fly and meet them face to face wherever they are, and sit with them and watch them use your app. And don't just do it once. Like I have flown all over the US to meet with event coordinators, CEO of restaurant groups multiple times, just to learn how they're actually using the product, and then handcraft that product so it just like fits like a glove. They can't imagine, it just feels like it was meant for them. You're a mind reader, then scale the business. So that would be my main experience share for aspiring entrepreneurs. And then a lot of businesses end up being trees falling in the forest that no one ever hears. So they don't know how to acquire customers profitably and at scale. And so they'll know how to acquire the first 1 or 2 or 10 or whatever, but then they have not figured out a series of hacks or shortcuts or tools to break through to their decision makers at scale and profitably. And that's like, you just have to, in my mind, you have to tune even if you don't think you're a marketer, you don't think you're in sales, all you have to think about is like, who is that ICP? Where do they hang out? What conferences do they go to? And someone said this years ago to me, said, you want to be the Incredible Hulk stomping around in a puddle. I'm like, what? When this guy told me that, I was like, what does that even mean? He said that his point was, you don't want to be obnoxious like the Hulk stomping around in a puddle. His point was, you want to be impossible to ignore. That, in a good way though. You want to be at that conference. You want to be posting LinkedIn content. And LinkedIn is still a massively underpriced attention. Like if you post on LinkedIn consistently, it's incredible how much of your ICP you can reach. And then you just want to be everywhere your ICP is. And so I guess those would be the two main experience shares for aspiring entrepreneurs.
So it's obsessed with your core customer, understand every little thing about them. Not all money is good money. And it's also be everywhere that your audience lives.
Yeah, figure out how to acquire customers profitably and at scale. Because a lot of businesses will go and buy Meta ads or buy Google Media or attend conferences and buy a flashy booth or whatever, and they'll blow through their money when they finally calculate their CAC or customer acquisition cost, and they'll like use that as a denominator, and they'll have LTV as the numerator, lifetime value of a customer. They'll realize it's completely upside down, and they're spending more to acquire the customer than they're making from the customer, and that didn't even include overhead or cost of goods sold. And so it's like completely upside down, and that's so, you know, my opinion is that your gross margin should be north of 75%, if possible. Gross margin should be north of 75. And of course, a lot of businesses aren't necessarily that, and so you have to be a volume play. But like for me, the rule of thumb is 75% plus gross margins, pretty lean overhead, and then figuring out obviously how to maximize lifetime value of the customer, and then minimize CAC or customer acquisition cost. All very obvious, but I have
basics
forgotten.
that everyone just skips over. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you guys are masters of this, so.
We're trying. I mean, I think bootstrapping also just instills that lesson in you really quickly. When you're not playing with investors' money and you're playing with your own money,
Yeah.
you think about CAC very religiously. So
Yeah, 100%. Like I always say as a bootstrapper, you know, the threat of getting hanged in the morning focuses the mind.
exactly. True, and it's hanged, not hung, by the way. So
It is hanged. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, it's hanged.
cool. Well, Jesse, I think you just crammed like 20 years of experience into 1 hour. So that was unbelievable. Really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Means the world to us. And we'll get dinner soon in Miami.
Awesome. Would love that. Thank you both very much.
All right, Jesse.